What's good? It's Woog. Devin Haney versus Vasily Lomachenko just wrapped up, and Devin Haney retains all of the lightweight belts via unanimous decision. It is not without controversy. The official scorecards were 116 to 112. That's 8 rounds to 4 for Haney, and then the other two were 115 to 113, 7 rounds to 5 for Devin Haney. There's a lot to unpack on this one. This was actually a very good fight, and I agree with Andre Ward that I'm sick of really good fights where both guys give extraordinary effort, basically be centered around the controversy. And a lot of people are calling robbery on this one. Look, going into the scorecards, yes, I was scoring the fight. Yes, my family who I was watching the fight with, we were all kind of scoring the fight and just asking each other round or around, like, how did you have that one? And, you know, kind of like, there were like at least 6 or 7 rounds where we were all kind of, I think so-and-so won, or I think so, you know, it was a lot of that. Like for nearly half the fight involved rounds that, you know, could have gone either way. So this was a very, very good fight. I personally, as I was scoring it, and we're going to get into like the anatomy of a scorecard in a second, but my brother and I, we actually both had it 116 to 112, and I know a lot of people are going to say, what? Like, and look, trust me, when I started seeing some of the feedback and some of the opinions out there, I'm like looking at my scorecard like, damn, did I mess up? Because as I'm scoring the fight, you're doing it round by round. And, you know, like my dad, he had it 115, 113 for Devin Haney. Again, my brother and I, we had it 116 to 112. I saw that Brian Campbell of Morning Combat and of CBS Showtime, he had it 116 to 112 for Lomachenko. I saw that Boxing Scene had it 114, a draw. CBS Sports' Brent Brookhouse had it 115, 113 for Lomachenko. I saw that both Max Kellerman and Mark Kriegel had it 115 to 113 for Lomachenko. I saw Max had given Lomachenko like 6 of the last 7 rounds, which I don't agree with that part. And I think a lot of this also comes down to how you scored those first 3 rounds. I gave the first round to Haney. The second and third round could have gone either way. But as I was scoring round by round, I gave the second round to Haney and then the third round to Lomachenko. And then I had Haney basically winning the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. So here's the thing. You could conceivably have Haney up 5 rounds to 1 after 6 rounds. But in the spirit of the fight, it doesn't seem right. So here's where I'm going with this. You could score these rounds as very, very close rounds where it's like, this really could go either way, but I'm going to shade it towards this guy, either because you liked, you know, Devin Haney's work to the body, or you liked the moments where Lomachenko would get inside and let his hands go and, you know, start hitting Devin Haney with those short punches up close. So a lot of this comes down to what you are weighing more heavily in terms of what each fighter is able to do effectively. It's a very, very difficult task, right? So you could have like a series of ultra close rounds and shade the vast majority of those ultra close rounds towards one guy. So you could have Haney up 5-1 after 6. I saw Brian Campbell, who again ended up scoring this 116 to 112 for Lomachenko. He had Haney up 4 rounds to 2 after 6 rounds. So let me know in the comments how you had this fight scored after 6 rounds, because that could start showing you where your scorecard might be headed, because I think we're all in agreement Lomachenko had much more success in the second half of the fight, although I gave Devin Haney the 8th and 9th round. That might be very unpopular as well. I did have Lomachenko winning the 7th round, and then I had Lomachenko also winning the 10th and 11th round, and I had Devin Haney winning the 12th round. By the way, I found this very interesting, but Lomachenko in the post-fight press conference said that he actually gave up the 12th round because he thought that he was so far up that he already had it in the bag. Who with the experience of Lomachenko would ever think that that is a possibility, that you are safe on the scorecards. Whether you're talking De La Hoya's last rounds against Felix Trinidad, or, you name it, nobody should feel safe and certain enough unless you just flat out dominated the fight, like, Haney versus Kambosos or something like that. How the hell can you feel comfortable enough to then forego giving your best efforts in the 12th round? I almost wasn't sure whether to believe what Lomachenko was saying there, just because it sounded unbelievable to me, in a fight that I think that just about everybody watching the fight felt that there was a lot of uncertainty heading into the scorecard. So how can one of the fight's participants think that it was safe enough to basically take the 12th round off? I did not understand that. And if that really was the case, well, then you get what you get, right? Because I think most people had Haney winning the 12th round, which could very likely, or at least very possibly, swing the fight 115 to 113 for Devin Haney. So back to the anatomy of a scorecard. If you have, like, say, 4 close rounds in a row where it's super, super close, and you want to side based on what you are valuing in terms of what you are seeing as the more effective work, if you are about to side with the same guy for like all 4 of those rounds or 3 of those 4 rounds, in the spirit of the fight, are you supposed to, again, if you have, like, let's say 4 very close rounds in a row, are you supposed to, if you bank 2 with one guy, then start banking equally close rounds, like rounds that almost were the same type of narrow margin as the 2 rounds prior? Are you then supposed to start going the other way with those scores so that you can have a more balanced scorecard? Because it almost sounds like that's what's being asked by those of you who thought that Lomachenko deserved the decision win. It's almost like you are supposed to kind of say, okay, if I'm going to bank 2 close rounds this way, it's only right that I bank the next 2 close rounds this way. I don't believe that that's how the fight is supposed to be scored. I thought that, or I think that, you are supposed to score each round in a vacuum. Like, each round is essentially its own fight, and you have no context in terms of how you scored the last round or the round prior, that you are only looking at the present round and scoring that. And if you are scoring it that way, then it's not super far-fetched for you to have had Devin Haney up 5 rounds to 1 after 6 rounds. Again, if you look at the 6 rounds in its totality and you say, well, how do you have it scored? I've got it scored 5 rounds to 1 Haney. Yes, it does sound like, what? 5 rounds to 1 Haney? This whole fight has been close. But again, depending on how you are scoring your round by round, all I'm saying is it's within the realm of fair play. Look, I do not see this fight as being a robbery. I wouldn't argue with a 115 to 113 Lomachenko scorecard. I do think that 116, 112 Lomachenko is a bit wide towards Lomachenko. But then again, I'm the guy who has it 116 to 112 Devin Haney. Now, after watching the whole fight, I regretted a little bit. I regretted having it 116 to 112, and I thought maybe 115 to 113 is more equitable. But again, the way that I was scoring it round by round, it did lead me, and I'm telling you that this was at least as I see it, an objective approach to scoring the fight. I did naturally have it 116 to 112 at the end of the day for Devin Haney. But again, I had it 5 rounds to 1 after 6 rounds. So some of y'all might look at that as being a disqualifier unto itself. All I am suggesting is that if you are looking at every round within a vacuum, it just within itself, that you could have any number of scorecards. You could have had this a draw. You could have had it 116 to 112 Haney, 115 to 113 Haney. Again, a draw. You could have had it 115 to 113 Lomachenko. And by the way, the round by round scoring that would lead to any of these scorecards, there were so many swing rounds in this fight. And I was parenthesizing my scorecards in some of these cases with the S, like indicating swing round. Others I would say C, which indicate that it's a close round, but maybe not super close to where you could call it a swing round, where it really does kind of feel 50-50, but it's a close round. But what I don't think that you could get into as you're scoring a fight is to start regretting how the fight is starting to look on your scorecard, and then start purposely banking rounds the other way to make your card appear more fair at the end of the day. And another thing that you cannot do is start rescoring your early rounds because of how the fight scorecard is shaping up at the end of the fight. You just can't do that. That is not how fights are scored. Once you have your score in, that's that. Like, you can't then go back, scratch that third round out, and then rescore that round and then say, okay, now I'm happy with my scorecard. No, there is none of that in play. So all I'm saying is that this was a super difficult fight to score. I don't see this as being a robbery. Even if you think that 116 to 112 is too wide for Devin Haney, look, I could understand that opinion. And again, I had it 160 to 112, and I could understand how somebody could think that that was too wide for Devin Haney. This is one of the more difficult fights to score, I could think of. Look, I mean, there are a lot of fights that are tough to score. The nature of scoring fights in general is pretty difficult. But I do not see this as being a robbery. Now, look, there was super high stakes here, and you hate to see somebody as great as Lomachenko kind of being thwarted by the resulting scorecards, and therefore basically be denied his claim to undisputed lightweight champion. And obviously seeing Lomachenko backstage, sobbing in that moment, that was a lot to take in. Look, I've been watching Lomachenko his entire career. So yeah, it was sad to see somebody who's been as great throughout their career as Lomachenko hit that moment, because he was probably processing 1,000 thoughts at one time. What this could mean, like, is this his last shot? He probably interpreted it as that's it. That was it. That was my shot, and I came up, short, at least in the eyes of the judges. And I think that he said in the post-fight that that his reason for crying in that moment was because of his son's disappointment, which, I mean, that just opens up another Pandora's box of emotions in that case, right? So yeah, this was a very emotionally involved fight, and I saw a lot of passion in the reactions to these scorecards. Again, people are calling out all-out robbery. People are in Devin Haney's comments just trashing him. And Timothy Bradley at the end of the fight, which I think that Bradley had predicted that Devin Haney would win, but as Bradley was calling the fight, it sounded to me like Bradley thought that Lomachenko won the fight. But Bradley also said at the end of the fight that the way that people were reacting with the boos and with some of the hurtful comments and so forth, trashing the dad and Devin Haney, just making this very personal, right? Timothy Bradley was saying that it reminded him of when he was granted the decision win over Manny Pacquiao, and what that did to him emotionally, in the way that he was viewed, in the way that he was talked about, in the way that he was treated after a beloved figure like Manny Pacquiao lost via close, controversial decision to Timothy Bradley. So I feel Bradley on that. I do not want people to just dog out Devin Haney, who, yes, he was dropping those late rounds, and yes, he did have some very scary moments, especially in the 10th and 11th. Look, watching the fight, I thought that Devin Haney might have been on his way to hitting the canvas. Like, it was looking bad in certain moments. And yeah, it seemed like it didn't have answers for Lomachenko's answers. Like, when Lomachenko started making certain adjustments, it looked like Devin Haney was out of tricks, essentially, which makes his spirited effort in the 12th round that much more meaningful. I think that a lesser fighter would have probably dropped that 12th round, and it would have been a split draw if that was the case, right? Since Devin Haney swept the 12th round on the judges' scorecards. And I also understand what Max Kellerman was saying, in referring to the story of the fight. Because yes, if you are watching the 12 rounds in their entirety and you didn't do the meticulous round by round scoring, you would look at the conclusion of the fight like, damn, it sure feels like Lomachenko won this fight. But, that's almost operating under like the MMA Pride rules, where it was just a different scoring criteria. And if you are to watch the whole fight and then determine who you think won that fight, yeah, I think that, Lomachenko would have won that fight, because there's also a recency bias. There's also, okay, Devin Haney started off, pretty effective in controlling range and going to the body beautifully. Like, I want to make sure that those of you who think that Lomachenko won 115 to 113 or even 116 to 112, that you are properly, or at least giving some substantial weight to Devin Haney's work to the body. I thought that was very effective, and I feel like sometimes it's easy to devalue the work to the body. So I just want to make sure that that isn't what's going on here. But yeah, if you are watching the whole fight and then deciding at the very end, based on everything that you saw in the entire 36 minutes of action, who feels like they deserve to get their hand raised, I understand the argument for the Vasily Lomachenko winning under that criteria. But again, that is simply not how the fight is scored. So what did we see in the ring? I think that we saw Lomachenko get his fair share of inside work, effective inside work done. I'm glad that this wasn't a hold fest. It wasn't, even though there was a lot of tussling and there was a lot of, where you kind of pinched the other guy's wrists with your elbows to lock up, basically. There was a lot of that, especially when Devin Haney started running into a lot of trouble in those later rounds, right? We started seeing a lot more of that. I also think that there was a good amount of high octane exchanges where, they would start whacking each other with shorter hooks in some of these longer exchanges. And Lomachenko started doing some of his best work in those moments. And when he started to really back Devin Haney up, it's funny because Devin Haney is kind of seen as being a back foot fighter. I always saw him as being a walk you down fighter, but you're walking the guy down behind the jab. Think, when Floyd Mayweather made the adjustments against Sugar Shane Mosley, or some of the ways that Floyd Mayweather fought Canelo Alvarez, where you are technically not backing up. You are actually, or the way that Floyd Mayweather started walking down Ricky Hatton, you are actually either standing your ground or you are moving forward, but you are moving forward with a defensive construct and behind a jab. I see Devin Haney as being that. He is not a back foot fighter in the sense that you are, just looking to counter and at your most dangerous backing up and as the guy's pursuing. I don't see Devin Haney as being at his most dangerous as the other guy is coming in on him. And as Lomachenko started effectively drilling Devin Haney with that short left hand, you would see the way that Devin Haney's backing up. He was backing up without a plan of attack. He was on the retreat without effective counters in a lot of those moments. And those are optically what look like Lomachenko's biggest moments. And there's another component here, and I'm gonna redo or at least re-implement doing some of these live chats, and we were discussing this in one or two of the videos. But if I was advising a fighter, I would suggest that you do not grow the top of your hair long. When you are getting hit and your hair starts to move around, it just looks like you are being affected, even if you are not being affected. Now, I do think that Devin Haney was being affected in a lot of those moments. But when you start growing, I remember Manny Pacquiao, this being an issue with Pacquiao, but in some of Pacquiao's fights, he was such a force of nature that when he was coming in, you started seeing his hair moving around as he's coming in and doing damage to the opposition. But yes, when he was fighting like Eric Morales, especially in the first 2 of their 3 fights, and then when he was fighting Marquez, you would see when Pacquiao would start getting backed up and hit, his hair goes flying and it looks like you are being affected because there's something so visually gripping that your eyes are drawn to. I remember going to Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano 2, and I'm watching the fight like, man, I wonder if the judges are looking at the way that Jermell Charlo's hair is moving as he's moving around the perimeter. Even when he is blocking shots, his hair is still moving in a way where it looks like something is happening. I remember watching Blair Cobbs getting stopped by Alexis Rocha, and in some of Blair Cobbs' wins, he has so much hair moving around just as he's moving around the ring, it looks like something everything that is outside of the fighter's control in that moment is happening to the fighter. Again, I don't want to make too much of this. I just could tell you, I've seen so many instances where I'm thinking, like, damn, if I'm a judge, am I being impacted by what I'm seeing in the visual of the hair moving around? Just something to keep in mind. Again, if I was advising a fighter, I would say, yo, just keep everything short. Don't give judges a reason to think that you are being affected. You know what I mean? Like, I'm watching Devin Haney start getting worked into the ropes, right? And then he's moving into the ropes, hitting the ropes, and every time he gets hit with something, you see the movement of his hair. And you might think that this is a superficial thing to discuss. All I'm saying is you need to consider every little thing that might impact the way that a judge is viewing a fight. But yeah, I'm gonna need to rewatch this fight. It was so fascinating to see, and I was wondering, like, damn, Devin Haney really doesn't have any answers for what Lomachenko was bringing in the 9th and 10th rounds. Plus, Devin Haney, I think, was really tired. You saw how open his mouth was, which is very interesting given that it's Lomachenko that's a 35-year-old, and it was Lomachenko who came on strong in the second half of the fight against Teofimo Lopez, against Jermaine Ortiz. Lomachenko, stopped Nakatani in the later rounds, I think like the 9th round. But yeah, that was a phenomenal effort from Lomachenko. And again, headed into the scorecards, I thought it was anybody's guess who won that fight, especially because it felt like, as you're watching the fight and you're watching the conclusion, it feels like Lomachenko is the deserving winner if you are not thinking in the round by round context, because it seemed like the biggest moments went to Lomachenko too. Like, it looked like if anybody was really starting to wilt, that it was Devin Haney. Even though in the first half of the fight, I saw some of those body shots that Haney was hitting Lomachenko with, and I'm looking at Lomachenko's body language and I'm thinking, like, damn, like, how badly is Lomachenko affected by these body shots? Because it looked like he was really uncomfortable when Devin Haney would throw those right hands to the body too. Because I was thinking, and I know that a lot of you guys brought this up in the build up to the fight, that Devin Haney was having trouble finding Southpaw Jojo Diaz with his jab. Well, then I was saying to that Devin Haney, I believe, is going to touch Lomachenko with something. If it's not a jab, he's going to find something, whether it's a jab to the body. It turns out it was those left jabs to the body and right hands to the body, and then getting in tight and then turning that right hand around into a scooping shot to a body. So he was hitting Lomachenko with a fair share of scooping looking hooks. And I think that those impacted Lomachenko. But again, this was just an extraordinarily tough fight to score. Let me know how you had it. And let me know if you saw this one as being a robbery, because I flat out do not see this as being a robbery. Look, if you had it 115, 113 either way, you can't cry robbery. Because what you are suggesting that in this sea of swing rounds, that all it takes is for one to go the other way, and then you've got a different outcome, basically. And yes, it was interesting that you had Shakur Stevenson in the ring after that saying, yeah, Lomachenko was the deserved winner. And Paulie Malignaggi's had a bone to pick with Devin Haney for some time, and I saw what he had posted on his channel. You have a lot of strong opinions on the outcome of this fight. I saw Dan Rayfield, he had it scored. It was either a draw or one round towards Lomachenko, I think. I could be wrong. I need to double check how Dan Rayfield had it scored, but he didn't see it as being a robbery either, and he gave his reasons on Twitter why it wasn't a robbery. It was a very reasonable response. This was not a robbery, even if you disagree with the outcome. And I think that it's because Lomachenko's moments were so big on the back half of the fight, or at least in those, 10th and 11th rounds especially. And not to say that he didn't win other rounds. He did win other rounds. But it's because he looked like he was coming on strong, and Devin Haney was holding on for dear life, basically, to try to make it out of the fight without getting beaten up anymore. Yes, in that case, it feels like Lomachenko won the fight. But again, that is not the way that a fight is scored. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. Look, I could understand any range of scorecards. I can understand the sentiment that Lomachenko won this fight, draw, Haney won this fight. Again, I had Haney winning this fight, even though I had regrets on the final outcome because I saw how the public was viewing this fight, or at least much of the public that I was viewing, you know, how they saw the fight. So it made me say, okay, well, maybe 115 to 113 instead of 116 to 112. And it sounds like 115 to 113 for Devin Haney, I feel at this moment would probably be the most appropriate scorecard. But again, any range is acceptable, or at least within a certain range is acceptable here. Please let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. What happens next? Does Devin Haney run it back with Lomachenko? I would tend to think not, even though I feel that that would be look, I almost think that Devin Haney might want to run it back. Not because he feels like his chances of the rematch, of winning the rematch more convincingly are, and not to say that he's convinced of that, but because he's not going to appreciate how the public views him and the way that he's going to get trashed on social media by the boxing public and so forth. I just don't think he's going to want to endure that, because he's already kind of been, you know, he's been slighted a lot, you know, for not having punching power, for having his dad advocate for him in the way that he does. A lot of people just don't like that. Like, there are a lot of things that people don't like about Devin Haney. Like, I don't totally get it. I get certain things, like the thing that he said about, I will never like lose to a white boy. Like, that part I can understand, like the flat out displeasure on hearing him say that. Like, that wasn't cool. But yeah, he has generally been maligned by a big segment of the boxing public, and the outcome of this fight isn't going to do anything to help him in that regard. So he might want to run that back with Lomachenko, or he might just move to 140, and it sounded like he was suggesting that that's a very likely outcome. And we don't even know what his next move promotionally will be. So he's got a lot of things that he's going to want to figure out here, right? Do you do another short deal with Top Rank and then maybe run it back with Lomachenko, or fight Shakur Stevenson? Do you sign back with Eddie Hearn and see what he's got in store at 140? Do you sign with Top Rank on another short deal and see what they have in store for 140 if you're trying to line something up with either Teofimo Lopez, or maybe like the winner of Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor? Do you try to seek out Jose Ramirez? There are a lot of options here. Or do you stay at 135? Like, let me know what you think he's going to do direction-wise in terms of what's next for his career. And what does Lomachenko do? Like, if you're not going to get the rematch with Devin Haney, well, I mean, isn't that Lomachenko scaling the mountain one more time, but this time coming up just short? Like, there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to consider with this one and in the fight's aftermath. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.